There is a moment in every person's life, a quiet, private moment, when the truth hits harder than any setback or failure. Your biggest battle isn't with the world. It isn't with your job, your family, your past, or your circumstances. Your greatest battle is with someone you cannot outrun, someone who follows you into every room, someone who whispers when the world goes silent. Yourself. You've felt this, haven't you? That sudden heaviness when you try to start something new. That voice that tells you you're not ready. That familiar pull back into old habits, even when you promised yourself you'd change. It's the version of you that ruins progress at the last moment. The version that doubts you when you're finally gaining momentum. The version that remembers every mistake you ever made and uses it against you. You fight it when you wake up. You fight it when you try to improve. You fight it in the darkness of your own thoughts. The ancient samurai understood this pain so deeply that they named this inner force Kage no Teki, the enemy of shadow. A silent opponent that grows stronger every time you ignore your wounds, every time you run from discomfort, every time you pretend you're fine when something inside you is breaking. Samurai warriors feared many things, but nothing frightened them more than the enemy hiding inside their own mind, because if that enemy wins, nothing else matters. But here is the part most people never learn. If you defeat the enemy within, no force outside can ever break you again. Today, you will learn the ancient technique that allowed warriors to confront their darkest self and walk away victorious. But first, tell me in the comments, what is the enemy within you trying to destroy? Your answer might help someone else recognize their own battle, and if you're ready to master your mind instead of being controlled by it, subscribe to Discipline Dojo. This journey requires strength, honesty, and courage, and I'll walk it with you. Now, your training begins. Chapter 1. The Shadow That Follows You. Every warrior in history faced two opponents, the one standing in front of them, and the one living quietly inside them. You already know the first enemy. It's the challenges you face, the setbacks you fight through, the pressure that confronts you in the daylight. But the second enemy, the one inside, that is the opponent most people never prepare for. The samurai noticed something profound. A warrior could be undefeated in battle, respected by his clan, feared by his enemies, yet completely destroyed in the silent hours when no one was watching. Because when the world becomes quiet, your inner enemy becomes loud, and it speaks in a voice you recognize, a voice that sounds like your own. This shadow self hides in everyday moments, when you overthink until your chest feels tight, when you doubt yourself right before success, when you feel guilty for mistakes you made years ago, when old wounds reopen without warning, when hidden anger leaks into your relationships, when fear convinces you to stay small, stay silent, stay safe. It is the part of you that fears failure, and the part of you that fears success even more. It is the version of you that resists change, because change requires courage. And this shadow grows strongest when you pretend it doesn't exist, when you keep busy to avoid your thoughts, when you laugh to hide your pain, when you stay silent about the burden you're carrying, when you promise yourself you'll deal with it later, even though it's already affecting your life. The samurai believed the enemy you refuse to face becomes the enemy that controls you. Your shadow shapes your choices. It blocks your progress. It whispers doubts at the exact moment you need strength. The first step is not to fight it, but to acknowledge it. To look inward and admit, there is a part of me that fears my own potential. Because you cannot defeat an enemy, you refuse to see. Chapter 2. The warrior who lost every battle inside. There is a story of a young samurai named Ren. Ren trained harder than anyone in his clan. He carried discipline like armor. He followed every rule, sharpened every blade, and mastered every technique he was taught. If you saw him on the training grounds, you would think he was unbreakable. But strength on the outside means nothing when the inside is falling apart. Privately, Ren was losing a war no one else could see. Every morning he woke with a pressure in his chest, a quiet dread that whispered he wasn't enough. Every night he lay awake replaying mistakes, convinced that one day everyone would discover he was a fraud. He hid these battles behind perfect posture and steady breath. But inside, he was drowning. His thoughts were sharper than any weapon pointed at him. His fear cut deeper than any blade he had ever faced, and the shame he carried felt heavier than his armor. You might know this feeling too. When you're doing everything right, yet something inside still tells you you're not good enough. One day, after training, Ren collapsed to his knees, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of the expectations he could never satisfy. An elder warrior approached him, a man known not for his victories, but for his wisdom earned through suffering. He placed a hand on Ren's shoulder and said, "Ren, you have mastered the sword in your hand, but the sword in your mind is killing you." Those words struck harder than any blow. Ren realized something painful. His real enemy wasn't the opponent waiting on the battlefield. His real enemy was the voice that whispered failure before he had even begun. The elder looked into his eyes and said, "Until you defeat the enemy within, you will always be defeated by the world." And in that moment, Ren understood. This was the beginning of his true training. Not the training of the body, but the reconstruction of his spirit. Chapter 3. The samurai principle. Know the shadow. The samurai believed the shadow self is not random. It isn't chaos. It isn't unpredictable. It follows patterns, the same way a warrior's stance reveals his next move, the same way hesitation reveals fear, the same way wounds reveal where the armor is weak. Your shadow attacks in the same places, at the same moments, in the same ways, again and again. And the tragedy is, most people never notice the pattern. They think life is against them. They think fate is cruel. They think they're unlucky, cursed, or doomed to repeat the same cycles. But the samurai knew better. They created a discipline called Kagemi, the mirror of shadow. Not a physical mirror, but a mirror of awareness, a ritual where a warrior sits in complete stillness and looks inward the way he would study an enemy across the battlefield. Because your shadow is an enemy, you must study before you can defeat it. During Kagemi, the warrior asks 3 questions, simple but devastatingly powerful. 1. What triggers my weakness? Is it rejection? Is it uncertainty? Is it criticism? Is it being ignored, misunderstood, unseen? Every shadow has a doorway. Know yours. 2. When do I betray my own goals? Is it when things get difficult? When progress slows? When fear rises? When comfort calls? Your shadow knows exactly when to strike. 3. What version of me appears when I am afraid? The angry one, the avoidant one, the insecure one, the overachiever who feels empty inside. This version of you is not your enemy. It is your wounded self asking to be seen. The samurai taught, your shadow is not mysterious. It is simply the version of you that has not healed. To defeat the enemy within, you must first understand it. To understand it, you must be willing to face it. And this act of honest reflection, is the beginning of true power. Chapter 4. The confrontation, seeing your darkest self without running. The samurai practiced a ritual called metsuke, the gaze. A simple word, but a terrifying practice. Because metsuke meant to look directly at the thing you fear most, yourself. Not the self you show the world, not the confident mask, not the disciplined posture, not the warrior everyone believes you are, but the self you hide, the self you avoid, the self you bury under work, noise, jokes, and distractions. In modern life, we've mastered the art of running. We run from silence. We run from discomfort. We run from the thoughts that creep in when the phone is finally put down. We drown our emotions in scrolling, entertainment, and constant stimulation. Anything to avoid meeting the version of ourselves that carries all the fear, shame, regret, and insecurity we never learned to face. But the samurai understood something powerful. The dark self only destroys you when you refuse to look at it. So they sat in stillness, feet grounded, breath steady, heart vulnerable, and invited their shadow to step forward. Ren began practicing metsuke every night. He sat in silence, closed his eyes, and faced the version of himself he hated most. The weak version, the frightened version, the jealous version, the ashamed version, the version that wanted to quit whenever life demanded more. At first it was unbearable. His chest tightened, his breath shook, his mind screamed to get up, to distract himself, to escape. Because facing your shadow feels like placing your hand on a blade. But night after night, he kept returning. And something unexpected happened. The shadow stopped roaring. It stopped threatening. It stopped overwhelming him. Because Ren began to see something he had never noticed. His shadow was not trying to destroy him. It was trying to expose him. Expose the wounds he had ignored. Expose the fears he had buried. Expose the truths he had run from. It wasn't his enemy. It was his teacher. It showed him where he needed strength. It showed him where he needed healing. It showed him the parts of himself still waiting to grow. And Ren realized, you cannot defeat what you refuse to understand. You cannot understand what you refuse to face. Metsuke wasn't about conquering the darkness. It was about no longer being controlled by it. Chapter 5. The technique, the split blade method. The samurai knew that the enemy within could not be defeated with muscle, speed, or strength. It could only be defeated with clarity and courage. So they created a method so simple, yet so brutally honest, that even the strongest warriors hesitated before practicing it. They called it the split blade method. Because to defeat the shadow self, you need not one weapon, but two. Blade 1, the blade of truth. Blade 2, the blade of action. One cuts through illusion, the other cuts through habit. Together, they slice through the darkness within. The blade of truth. The cut that hurts before it heals. Truth is sharp. truth is uncomfortable. Truth exposes the places where you've been lying to yourself. The samurai believed the shadow feeds on illusion. The illusion that you're weak, the illusion that you're broken, the illusion that you must remain who you've always been. So they asked questions that pierced the heart. What lie do I keep believing about myself? Where am I pretending to be weak because it's easier than trying? What story from my past am I still letting define me? Who told me I wasn't enough, and why did I believe them? These questions are not gentle. They are meant to cut, because the truth wounds you only once, but lies wound you forever. When you speak the truth about your shadow, it loses half its power instantly. It can no longer hide. It can no longer manipulate you. It can no longer tell you that you cannot change. The blade of action, the cut that breaks the chains. The second blade is even more important, because what good is truth if you never act on it? Your shadow self survives through repetition. Old habits, old fears, old patterns that keep you trapped in who you used to be. So the samurai forced themselves to take one action their shadow desperately did not want them to take. Wake up when the shadow wants you to stay in bed. Speak the boundary the shadow wants you to avoid. Start the project. The shadow says you'll fail. Walk away from the thing the shadow uses to control you. The samurai taught, every time you act against your shadow, you reclaim territory from it. Even a small action becomes a declaration of war, a reclaiming of your strength, a reminder that the voice within does not own you. The enemy within shrinks the moment you stop obeying it. Chapter 6. The inner duel, winning the battle. No one sees samurai. Warriors believed every human faces a duel far more dangerous than any sword fight. A duel with no audience, no witnesses, no applause, no visible opponent. A duel that takes place in the quietest moments of your life, in your thoughts, in your breath, in the choices you make when no one is watching. The duel with yourself. Ren's duel began one winter morning when he stepped onto the training field. Frost coated the ground. The air bit at his skin. Every warrior around him seemed stronger, faster, more certain. And in that moment, his shadow rose like a cold wind behind his ribs. You aren't ready. You'll embarrass yourself. You're weaker than the others. You aren't meant to become anything more. These were not the voices of enemies. These were echoes of every fear he had ever hidden, every insecurity he had ignored, every memory of failure he thought he had buried. He felt small. He felt exposed. He felt his courage slipping like water through his fingers. And this is where most people lose their duel. Not because they lack strength, but because the shadow convinces them to surrender before they even begin. But Ren remembered the elder's words. You defeat the shadow by refusing to kneel to it. Not by overpowering it, not by silencing it, not by pretending it isn't there, but by refusing to obey. So Ren stepped forward, not confidently, not fearlessly, but willingly. And that single step was his victory, because the samurai understood. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing which voice you obey. Every day, you stand in this same battlefield, between the voice that destroys you and the voice that builds you. The duel is not fought once. It is fought every morning you rise, every choice you make, every moment you decide who you will become. And the warrior wins not by being fearless, but by stepping forward anyway. Chapter 7. Integration. Turning the enemy into an ally. The final stage of a samurai's inner training was the one no warrior expected, because after years of battling the shadow, studying it, confronting it, resisting it, the samurai discovered something shocking. The goal was never to kill the shadow. The goal was to integrate it, to take what once controlled you and turn it into your source of strength. They believed your darkness contains your power, but only if you learn to hold it without fear. The shadow self is not just the part of you that fails, it is the part of you that feels, and in those feelings live pieces of strength you never realized you had. Your shadow holds your pain, but pain gives birth to wisdom. Your shadow holds your ambition, but ambition fuels change. Your shadow holds your trauma, but trauma teaches resilience. Your shadow holds your suppressed potential, but potential becomes power when revealed. When you reject your shadow, you become divided. Half of you moves forward, while the other half pulls you back. But when you learn to understand it, you stop fighting yourself and start transforming yourself. Ren's greatest transformation came not when he defeated his shadow, but when he listened to it. His doubts forced him to train with precision. His fears sharpened his awareness. His wounds made him compassionate toward others. His failures became maps showing him where growth was still possible. He realized something profound. His shadow was never there to destroy him. It was there to shape him, to show him the parts of himself that were still unfinished, unformed, untapped. The version of you that hides in the dark is not the enemy. It is the version of you that is waiting to evolve, waiting for permission to step into the light. Integration is not surrender. It is transformation. And the warrior who integrates his shadow becomes whole for the first time in his life. Chapter 8. The Samurai Path to Inner Victory. The final teaching of the samurai was this: no enemy can defeat the warrior who has defeated himself. This was not a metaphor. It was a truth forged through centuries of blood, loss, and rebirth. When a warrior masters his inner world, the world outside stops feeling like a threat. Self-doubt no longer dictates your choices. Fear stops deciding your future. Old wounds lose their grip on your identity. The voice that once sabotaged you becomes quiet, and a stronger voice begins to rise within. A voice that says, I am not who I was. I am who I choose to become. Ren stepped back onto the battlefield, not with a louder roar or sharper blade or stronger arms, but with a quieter mind. He didn't return as the warrior who never felt fear. He returned as the warrior who no longer feared himself. The enemy in front of him was no longer the true opponent. It was simply a mirror reflecting how far he had come. Every cut he made, every movement he took, was no longer fueled by insecurity or desperation or the need to prove something. It was fueled by clarity. And that is the transformation waiting for you, because the moment you stop fighting your shadow and start understanding it, you become something rare, something the modern world is starving for. A person who is not controlled by doubt, fear, shame, past mistakes, or emotional storms. A person who walks forward even when the path is uncertain. A person who remains centered even when life becomes chaotic. A person who is whole instead of fractured. The samurai believed that true victory was not found on the battlefield, but in the heart that walks onto it. When you defeat the enemy within, you stop living life in survival mode and start living it with purpose, direction, and unshakable strength. Ren's journey is not just his. It is yours. Your shadow has followed you for years, but now you know its name, you know its patterns, you know its weaknesses, and most importantly, you know it can be transformed. This is the beginning of your inner victory, and the warrior you are becoming is watching you take your next step. For the next 7 days, practice this. Day 1. Write the name of your shadow, the part of you that holds you back. Day 2. Write its patterns. When does it attack? Day 3. Practice Metzke. 3 minutes of facing your emotions without running. Day 4. Use the blade of truth. Identify one lie your shadow tells you. Day 5. Use the blade of action. Do one thing your shadow fears. Day 6. Rewrite your identity, who you are becoming now. Day 7. Honor your progress. The duel has begun. But listen closely. This is not just a challenge. This is a turning point in your life. Because the moment you decide to face your shadow, truly face it, you separate yourself from the version of you who kept running and step into the version who rises. Your shadow has followed you for years. You've felt its weight in your chest, its whisper in your mind, its grip in your habits. But this is the week you finally say, enough. This is the week you stop letting your old self decide the fate of your new one. So write in the comments, I face my shadow. Say it with intention. Say it like a warrior who is done hiding. Say it like someone who is ready to reclaim their strength. And subscribe to Discipline Dojo. Not for the numbers, but because you're building a mind that cannot be controlled by doubt, fear, or darkness. The war within does not end in 7 days. But in 7 days, you will no longer fight it alone. Your transformation begins now.